Okay, so this is week 5. Technically, it's supposed to be a midterm today. There is no midterm, but we will be going over some more Playmaker stuff. So I went over Perforce already, and I'm starting a brand new project. I'm going to call this week 5 project. No packages imported necessary. There are, I like to do the 2x3 split again. I just don't, if you guys have any other layout options that you find is useful, let me know. Like none of these other ones like ever seem to make sense to me. 4 split is okay, but you lose a lot of screen real estate. I just like 2x3. Okay, so I'm going to grab the audio and objects packages, and I'm going to import them into Unity. So here's my audio, which is just a bell and a buzzing sound. It's weird. Didn't actually import the objects one. These just give us some game prototyping objects, like we have like a platform, like this thing here, which is color coded, so we can do we can apply a material on top of it, and these are all from the Playmaker website. Also, we're going to need Playmaker, so I can put Playmaker in here. Let me know when you guys have this all imported. You can just click and drag those packages into Unity, and that's like the easiest way to import them. You can also right-click here and import and point to it, but I just go to Zool, go to GA3331, and you can grab these 2 things. Well, if you have Playmaker downloaded, and you can drag that too. What's that? All right, you guys good? Anyone not good? Some of you guys are browsing. If you're on Facebook, then that's good. You already said. Kai, you're good?
Like download an asset on the website. Where can you find those assets?
I put them up on Zool.
You mean like the asset you download it yourself on
These?
the website?
You can find them on the Playmaker website, yeah.
Yeah, but if you download it, where can you find it again?
If you downloaded it?
Yeah.
Oh, just go to here. This is the link right here. Okay.
I mean, like I downloaded a character already, and I don't know where to find it.
I will help you out with that later, because like we don't need to worry about character. Honestly, like for the entirety of this class and next class, you won't need to like import any characters if you want to make a game. Honestly, you can make games with just cubes and spheres and cylinders and spheres. Like that's all you need to make a fun game. I guarantee you can make a fun game without any assets, and that's like the goal. Like you shouldn't really worry about downloading characters. I mean, you can. I don't want to discourage it, but you should be able to make a game without any models or animations or textures or anything like that. Once you can get to that point, that's really prototyping. Because if you're working and worrying about models, you're not prototyping. You're trying to make something that's more than just a prototype. You're trying to actually make a full game first. And that's the goal, is that you do not need anything more than just the simplest meshes, right? Like cubes. You can make an entire game with just these right here. All right? OK. Questions?
No.
No? OK. All right, let's do this. So I have my project here, and let's just make a simple third-person controller that's top-down. Now we're kind of more familiar with Playmaker. I think starting off with something really simple is a good way to jump back into it. So I'm just going to add a floor to my level, which is just a plane. So I have this thing here. I'm just going to make a floor. I'm going to make it huge. I'm going to add a light as well, just so I have something to see. And the key in Unity, which is really nice that Unreal doesn't have, is the concept of a object that is actually the camera. Like, you move this camera around in the scene, and it moves around in the game, right? So I can like spin this camera down and up, and it moves it in the game, and that is the camera. What's cool, though, is that you can actually take this camera, and you can attach it to the character, and now you suddenly have a camera that moves around with the character, OK? So first, let's start off by making a character that we can move with WASD. pick an object that's going to be good for a character. I like to use capsules. Capsules are really great for representing characters because they're just like character-ish shaped. They're like blobby. I don't know. That's what the first-person controller actually uses as well. So add a capsule to your scene. Make sure that this capsule here is not sinking into the ground. If it does sink into the ground a little bit, it'll fall through the world on startup. So see here, it's actually sinking through a little bit. So just make sure it's raised up off the ground. And again, the first things that I like to do whenever I'm making any kind of game objects is to name the objects correctly. So I'm going to name this thing the player. At the very least, you should name the player because it's the one thing that's probably going to be used the most in your game. I'm going to name this guy the player. By default, our player is just a capsule. Doesn't have any special behavior or anything like that. So we're going to add some behavior to it. So I want you guys to add a Playmaker FSM to this player object that we're making. All right. And you could even name your Playmaker FSMs. We don't really need to worry about that right now until we get to AI. Once we get to AI, then there's actually a need to name your FSMs differently. But for now, we're just going to have one. And let's go to the Fsm Editor. I introduce you guys to this. This is a state machine, and by default, everything in Playmaker starts with one state. Right? If you guys get to this editor view, make sure you add the component. Ramon, let me know if you issues. Okay. So I can't see everyone as easily, so I can see reflections and stuff. Okay. I'm just going to rename this state to be default. This is going to be the only state that we need to move around the player. So what is actually involved in moving something around in your game? Well, you have the player pushing a key, right? That's one part. You need to figure out what key the player is pressing, or if you have like a controller plugged in, you need to figure out if he's moving the left analog stick or not. So basically, one part of a character or a player in a game is the input. You have to figure out whether he's pressing anything, right? Then the other half of moving a character is the actual physical act of moving him in the direction that you want, okay? So those two things, those two sides, which are handling input and moving the character, can be represented with two actions. That's it. You only need two actions, okay? We're going to add the action first that lets us figure out what direction the player wants to go. We're going to handle the input that the player puts in first, okay? In Unity, there's something called an axis vector, A-X-I-S vector. This is a generic term that's used to represent whether the player is pressing WASD or using control. You guys ever play like a PC game that uses a 360 controller? Are you guys supporting 360 controllers in your game? Probably not, right? So point and click. Maybe you're not allowed to talk about it. So for our PC game, for Hunted, we needed to support both a 360 controller and mouse and keyboard. So the thing is, though, is that W moves you forward on the keyboard, right? But so does pressing up on the analog stick on the 360 controller. And down is mapped to S, and A and D are mapped to left and right, right? So they kind of do the same thing, right? Yeah.
Just a quick question. So these Playmaker scripts, I'd imagine that they're going off the input tags?
Yes, yep, exactly. So you know where I'm going at, right?
Horizontal and vertical.
Yep. So one of the things is that axis vector is basically Unity's representation of how forward, back, left, and right get to the game, okay? What that means is that there's a single place that you can ask Unity, no matter if they have a 360 controller plugged in or they're pressing WASD, okay? Which is really nice about Unity. What this means, though, is that Unity will take, if you press WASD, that actually maps to a direction, right? If I press W, I want to move forward, right? That's the forward key. If I press D, I want to move right, right? What if I press W and D at the same time? It's like diagonal. Right? I want to move diagonal front and left, front and right. If I press W and D, you guys ever play first-person shooters? I hope.
Yes.
That's WDs, right? So what Unity will give us is a direction that the player wants to go. That's what we care about, and that's what this action is going to do for us. There's an action called getAxisVector, and getAxisVector basically takes the key presses or the analog stick input and gives us the direction that the player wants to go. It's basically like a top-down view of where the player wants to go in your level, okay? Does that make sense, you guys? What's nice is that you can get a top-down view. It also has the ability for your Unity to figure out whether they want to move up or down. We're not going to worry about that for now. We're only going to really be worried about the horizontal axis. when you click Edit here, it doesn't open. Okay, you have it.
It's really small.
Make it bigger.
Yeah.
So getAccessVector is basically the one-stop shop for getting a direction that the player wants to go. Okay, and Michael, this is basically, you see how it says horizontal and vertical here? It basically maps those to a single vector of where you want to go.
And the multiplier is essentially multiplying time delta.
It's just a flat multiplier.
Oh.
So this is going to give us a direction that the player wants to go. Okay, I keep repeating that. Hopefully it makes sense. We need to store that into a variable. Remember the last week I mentioned variables are just buckets that hold the information, right? We want to hold the direction that they want to go. We want to remember that information because we're going to use it to figure out and actually push the character in that direction. So the only thing you need to store here is the vector. That's the only thing that's required here. This is the direction that the player actually wants to move. So you have to add a variable for that. So if you go over to the Variables tab, and I'm going to make a new variable called direction, and it's going to be a vector 3. So make sure you choose vector 3 in the drop-down box. It's not a float. It's a 3-dimensional vector. So go ahead and add one of those. And then assign this to your store vector drop-down box here. Okay. Let's just prove that this is working. I'm going to go really slow at first to make sure that we're doing everything right.
How do you add the vector 3?
Go to Variables. Type in your name here.
Oh, the name here?
Yeah, and then the drop-down box here is vector 3.
What's the name is going to be?
Name it something like direction is good. And you can do the same thing in script too, Sam. Like all this stuff translates to, you can get the same exact information. There is a way you can take the horizontal and vertical direction that the player wants to go, regardless of if they're using controller or keyboard. So it's the same thing. This is just combining those two into one nice behavior. Kai, make sure that you have selected vector 3. This says vector 3 here, okay? Double check that for me.
Before I was very out because I add the name too.
Okay. Did you add it? Okay, then it should show up here in this drop-down box in the State tab. Do you have the axis vector action added? This action, do you have this thing added? And you're storing the vector? Okay. So now that everyone's on the same page, click the debug checkbox here. Notice, remember, the debug checkbox will basically tell us what value is in that bucket, that variable that we have. And you can press play. So I'm going to play, and I'm just going to hit W, A, S, and D. And if you watch the value on the lower right, see how it changes? When I press up, it's moving me in positive Z. If I press S, it's going to move me in negative Z, right? X, Y, Z, those are the coordinates there. It's on the bottom left here, Michael, like right next to hide unused. Here. In the bottom right, like into, yeah. So you guys all see the values changing? Notice how the values are mapped to W, A, and D, right? So if you press A and S, are you seeing those values changing too? No, that's working. You're not moving the character yet. Just look up here. Look here while you're moving. See how those values are changing?
Okay.
I just want to show you guys that your inputs are mapping to directions in X, Y, and Z. Why we're not using here like the middle part, we're only using the first and third part, which are X and Z. In Unity, Y is up, X is to the right, and Z is forward. Okay? So when I press forward, look at Z, it's 1. All right? That means Z is forward. When I press backwards, Z is negative 1. That's back behind me. Okay? When I press right, that's positive X. Okay? See how X is 1 over there? And press left, X is negative 1. And press W and A together, I'm moving both left and forward at the same time. Okay? So we're going to take this, and we're going to move the character based on this vector. All right? So let's add the second part of the behavior for controlling a character, which is to actually move him. So go to your action browser again. There's 2 actions that let you move characters with a character controller. So there's kind of like a lot of different ways you can move people in Unity. One of the simplest things you can do is use the built-in character controller, okay? A character controller is kind of a really, it tries to make it as easy as possible for you to be able to move people around. It includes things like handling input, going up and down slopes, standing on moving platforms, all that stuff. That's what a character controller does for you. Or you can ignore a character controller. You don't have to use a character controller. And the character controller is nothing more than just the ability to move someone around. You can use physics if you want. Okay, you ever play a game that's like physics-driven, like a ball? Actually, Michael, you did this, right? So you can have, in Unity, you can have a ball that's moving around with physics that you move with your WASD. Okay, I'm going to show you guys right after this how to do that too. So let's start off with a simple one, which is a character controller. So if you search for character, I'm sorry, do simple move, controller simple move. If you just type simple in the top left, we're going to use the basic, most basic version of moving a character. Controller simple move. I'm going to get to the red box. It's important. Okay. Controller simple move is basically an action that lets us move a character based on a direction that we want to go. All right. If you see a red box there, that's important. What does that box say? Right. It says this game object requires a character controller component. You can click on that red box and add the required component. This is just a nice helper feature in Playmaker that will automatically add anything that you need to actually get this thing to work. If you don't click on that box, your character won't move. All right, so if you see this box, just click on the box. It'll make the box go away. And then if you don't have a box, then I don't know what version of Playmaker you're using. Is this character, do you see a character controller? I'll get to you in a second, Kai. Let's just have everything else move. I'll help you in a second.
Yeah, that box too, but it's not red. It's just like normal color.
Okay, maybe it'll just work. So the move vector here, this is where we're going to plug in the thing that we stored in our bucket. All right? There should only be one option in the move vector, and it should be your direction. All right? And that's it. So we're going to tell our controller to move in the direction that the player wants to go. Now if you play your game and use WASD, your guy should be moving around in your level. All right? Simple. What if you want him to move faster? If you want him to move faster, just adjust the speed. Make it something like 5. And if it's not moving, it seems like some of you guys may not have this moving. It may be that you didn't actually get that box that told you that you needed to add a character controller.
So on the get axis vector, you have a multiplier, and on the controller simple move, you have a spinning.
Yeah.
So if you were to adjust both of those,
They would multiply.
back.
They would multiply with each other. Right, so yours is moving. So yours is moving. Oh, cool. Can you make the speed like faster? Are you moving, Kelvin?
Yeah.
Okay. You already got it.
Go to your
So you get your guy to move.
Yeah, he's moving. It was just looking different for Kelvin, but I think it's because I didn't see
Okay.
parent to camera.
So multiplier, if I put that at 2, that would set speed. So if this times 1, or this was at 2, now it's at 2, versus times 2.
Hi, is your guy moving? He is. All right, so let's attach the camera to this thing. All right, we have this thing that we're moving around. Get my microphone up again. So if I want to attach a camera to it, first let's put the camera in a position that seems like a third-person controller. So the camera right now, I'm just going to move it into the player a little bit. Maybe I make it a little bit more top-down-ish. Okay. And pull back a little bit. And then if you just want it to move with a player, all you have to do is take your camera and drag and drop it onto your player. So select your camera and drag and drop it onto your player. You should see it becomes a child of player. So it becomes underneath the player, and there's a little triangle that expands it to show that it's been parented correctly. And then when you play, everywhere that your player moves, your camera will move with it. It might be hard to tell, especially if your floor is like really just plain. Maybe you can add texture, or you can like color it differently. But if you see it moving in your scene view, you know that it's working correctly. All right. Okay, everyone got a character moving? drag and drop the camera on top of the player, not in the hierarchy view. Top left. That's it. Okay, let's move a physics ball around. Just to show you guys how easy it is, I'm going to delete the player. I don't need that player that I just made because there's literally just one state and two actions. Let's make another version of a player that's just a ball that moves around, okay? So go ahead and add this time. It's important that you add something that's ball shaped, like a sphere. You can try to move a cube. It will move in strange ways. Go ahead and add a sphere to your level. This time, like, delete your player, guys. Like, if you, it's not that hard to make a new player. Make sure you don't delete your camera with the player, because if you parented your camera, yeah, just undo. Yeah, yank it out. Just drag it off. And we're still going to use a get axis vector action, but this time we're going to use a different one to apply the input. All right. So here's my sphere. Again, the first thing I like to do is rename objects to be like player. Trust me, it will save you time and frustration later when you have thousands and thousands of cubes and you don't know which one is the actual player object. I've been there. It's not good. All right. So here's my sphere. We're going to add a Playmaker FSM to this sphere. Same thing we just did. So go ahead and go to Add Component on your sphere and do another Playmaker FSM. And here, I'm going to rename the state to be default again. I'm going to add an action again, which is going to be get axis vector. Okay. Should be familiar. You just did this. So again, you're going to add get axis vector as an action. Oh yeah, that's a good reminder actually. I should just do that now. Remember that you should change your color. Honestly, it's just I have this set up at home. I don't need to set it up every time. But. And Sam, you can, if you want to try, you can try adding force, and that'll make it work. So move. So blue. I think blue today for whether I'm playing or not. Yes, I can't see anything. Perfect. Maybe I'll make it black to make it even more obvious. This shit needs to. I need to not be. There we go. That's perfect. Now I can't see shit, and I can't break anything. I don't need to see the button.
Can we see the pause button?
Okay. If you want to pause, you can hit Control-Shift-P. So here's my state. One action, get axis vector. You have to add a variable again. So let's add direction again as a vector 3. So we're going to add another variable called direction.
So you add another Playmaker.
Yeah, add a new one. I actually deleted my other player, Kai. I deleted everything and I started from scratch. So you don't have to do that. I recommend that you do at least a new object. So I have that get axis vector. I made a variable, so I'm going to store it in there. Then what I want to do is I want to move this thing with physics, all right? And physics behaves a little differently. Physics doesn't use a character controller. Physics uses force and velocity. You want to move a ball around, you have to actually apply force to it as if you're pushing on it, okay? So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take this vector that we want to move towards. We're going to call add force as our second action. Not add explosion force. That won't get you what you need. Just force. This time we get a different error saying, hey, this game object requires a rigid body component. It's not a character controller. It's a rigid body. Rigid body it's just a way to represent physics. It's not, ragdolls would be considered something like a soft body physics with if you have cloth on it. Rigid bodies are basically physics objects. So you click on it. It will add a rigid body component to this thing. The vector you want to move here is going to be direction. Okay? And this time, we have to click the checkbox that says move it every frame. All right? Otherwise, it'll only apply the force once. All right? Ramon, how are you doing on this? Did you add the... just add get access vector again as an action. So go to your action browser. Yeah, search. It's exactly what we just did. So if you search for axis, A-X-I-S. Cool. It's showing red. Click on it. Wait. Read what it's saying, and then you click on it.
Game object require rigid body component. Click add require component.
Click to add a required component. So did you guys get it to add force? Did you play it? Does it move around? Did you do it every frame?
It rolls.
Oh, there it goes.
Okay, so Ramon, I see a red box over there. What does that red box say?
It says game mods requires rigid body component.
Right, because you're trying to add force to it, so it's telling you, hey, you want to add force to this sphere, it needs a rigid body component. So go ahead and click that box. It'll add it for you, which is a nice feature. Make sure, Ramon, that you have the direction here filled out for what you're storing it into. Do you have that? Here, this one, sorry. The store vector one right here. You have direction here?
Yes.
And do you have direction here as well in the add force action under vector?
Yes.
Okay. And then scroll down to the bottom. Make sure this thing is checked to true every frame.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, that should be it. So play. Now you should be able to hit WASD.
Oh, it rolls 8.
See how it rolls around?
Yeah.
Your force that you're adding, by the way, is 1 Newton of force every second. It's kind of low, which means once the ball picks up momentum, it's hard to turn. So here, if you want the force to be higher so you can move around faster, just take this multiplier value in the get axis vector and crank it up to like 10.
No, do not hit the mark. Okay, so
When you crank it up, it'll actually let you move faster and control it better. So if you want to move faster like this, see how my ball is rolling around? And I can actually spin and change directions. Yeah, actually, I made one of those in one of the prototyping classes. You can totally make a Kerbal Space Program. Adding force is not just for like spherical objects. You can add force to anything. As if it has a rigid body, you can like kick this thing up, right? You can have this thing go higher up in the air by adding force upwards, all right? I think you guys need to do an exercise for this. So with this physics body, I want you guys to add behavior. This is a lab now, where you press spacebar, and as long as you're pressing spacebar, or every time you hit spacebar, I want you to kick that ball up in the air a little bit, okay? So what did we just do? We added, I'm going to have you guys use add force, but I want you to add force upwards. So I want you guys to add force in the Y direction. And remember last week how we did all the key pressing? There's an action called get key down. So I want you to have this action when you press a key to add force to it. So the trick is that do not use this state machine that you just made. So don't do it in the same state machine, all right? Because it's not going to really work well. Add a brand new FSM component to your object. So click on your player, go to add component, and add another new one here. Okay. So spend like the next few minutes working with a new FSM component that when you press spacebar, it adds force upwards, okay? Yeah, if you want. It's kind of like a jump. Think of it like a jump mechanic for your ball that's physics driven. You need 2 states in your FSM. One to detect if you press the key, and one to actually add the force. So if you have less than 2 states, you're not doing it correctly. If you have more than 2 states, I don't know, you maybe do something cooler. Try to keep 2 states. So I want 2 states, one that handles the key press, and one that adds force. And you can just do it in the same screen. still want you to be able to move it around with WASD, by the way. This is why I want you to have two FSMs on it. You're basically going to have, yeah, you got it. So, which one of these things are you editing? So this is your one that moved the ball, right? This is one we just did.
Yeah.
What about this one? Do you edit this one?
No.
Yeah, do you edit them? Okay, so this is the one where I want you to add I want you to have two states, one to detect whether you press the button, and one to add force upwards on the output. So this one, yeah, call this one waiting for two press or something like that. Yeah, I think this behavior needs to be here. Yeah, you can just change. You can set this to be start state. So right click on the state 1 label, do set as start state. Now let's change that. So now we'll do it. Yeah. So do you remember what action we added last week for pressing keys? Like key presses? I just mentioned it like not 2 minutes ago. You need to add an action. That's the word key. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the one. So what key are you looking for? You have it right. What is that list? Do you want me to like leave you alone for a bit to reason it out?
No.
Try to find the space bar. Did you already get it set up, Sam?
No. I'll get it. I'll get it.
What is the accent for the X, Y unity?
Y is up.
You mean like the
Oh, get key down.
vector or something?
Get key down.
The key down?
Oh, we're doing Y is up now?
Yes.
You want to make it move around?
I don't want you to make it move around. I want you to have it so when space bar is pressed.
No, I mean like the one with the vector tree variable.
You don't need that. This is a separate thing. So you just need to have when space bar is pressed, that adds a force upwards. So you don't need a variable or anything like that. You can't hit space. You actually have to find the word space here.
So the hint is we don't need a variable.
Yes. You just need an event. This is kind of a review from last week as far as triggers and remember how I had you guys set up playing sounds to keyboard presses? Remember how I had you guys find different keys, different sounds? If you need to, open up your homework or your lab work from last week and find out how you did it. It's exactly the same, except instead of playing a sound, you're going to add a force. And you need two states. Two. No less, no more.
But I mean, don't you need a variable to tell it how much force to apply?
Actually, no. You could just tell it to move up.
This is pretty much it.
Yes.
If I'm down, jump, I just space.
Yep, that's pretty much it. That's exactly right.
Oh.
Make sure you have your
Add force.
Oh, that looks good.
It's not working.
And the only thing you need to do is specify the Y. So click on the little button, yeah, there, and just type in like 200 there.
Okay.
It's got to be something a little bit more than like, yeah, do that. Okay. So,
Why am I?
there it goes. Hey, jump. Did you see it?
Yeah. It did one little.
But look where it's in now. It's stuck there. So you have to make it go back
Oh.
to the thing.
It's actually fun just to make it launch.
Oh, so for these guys that did it right, you should be able to move and jump at the same time. Right?
Release. I released the
You got a remote.
ball, I guess. So get key down.
I'm just trying to add a little feature.
Oh, okay.
So I noticed that if you keep pressing those buttons,
To go back.
so is there a way to access maybe the transform's position and if it's
Why?
the
You
right
want to find out if it's on the ground?
Yeah.
I think there's actually something that is on the rigid body that says where this is. So do the rigid body. Yeah, grab the rigid body component out of this thing.
So I have this. Oh, no, I don't.
Like jump.
I think there's like B's on ground, on ground.
So your ripple's not B.
You know what? Tape.
Okay. Why?
If I press jump, it will jump.
Now I won't do it again.
I swear there was something wrong with the faster.
Do you-
I changed something.
Look, it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Transition.
What sends the
Y
key
button.
down?
I was thinking about
When you're
access
pressing the key down again, then it
That's
can
not really
transition.
great. Like
You have to
the
smash
proper
it
way
twice
to do this.
versus
Maybe
cycle
you
once.
can do this. I thought this
Jump
before. I
right
just didn't
Key
know how
up
to do it.
and
You just not half
Have you done your test?
So
Because
key
I've run
up,
into it a couple times with like
key up, fall.
like instigating a
Or
line from
I can just do completed.
relative to making it bigger. So every time you
No
press
transition.
so press the button,
Transition.
access is natural.
Ah, yeah.
No.
So it's the same concept,
Thing
except
yeah,
it's really
that,
simple. You're
but
just
on
gonna do
the
raycast down.
There, if I
You
click.
could do raycast down, what, about
No,
like
on it.
maybe half a unit.
And then finish.
And just hit anything.
Yeah,
You can
I
jump.
think that's probably what it is.
So why don't you try that? I want you. This is your read.
Yeah, that was.
I don't know.
Figure out how to do a raycast downwards.
Isn't
And
that
if you hit
obvious?
something, allow it to jump. So
I would definitely.
Thanks.
I fucking,
that looks
It's
good.
a state of mind that
Cool.
you can get into.
What about here?
I fucking
Not
understood.
translate. Use that add force.
Yeah, you can.
Add force.
If you
Yeah.
were
That's a better thing to do.
angry about it, you can.
Let's add an actual force.
When we were in.
No, I got pissed at it because it kept crashing.
It's there. You're. Why is your window always like super tiny? I swear this thing is like you have so much real
Come
estate.
back down.
It's
Add
just
force.
it's pretty fun.
Yes. And see that warning? Yep. And then
No,
do
when
Y.
I
So
touch
click
the
on this,
camera,
this
it
box right
rolls.
here. That changes this to a value. You can try like take
Really?
I attached the camera to it and it was like whoop, sky, ground,
Wow.
sky,
That's
ground.
it. So play and try.
Did you catch it right? 'Cause
I
look.
clicked and
Oh,
checked.
never mind. Mine
Ah,
does
he jumped.
that too.
Yeah,
see it?
see?
He's stuck there. But play in.
Oh.
You'll see that he'll
Whoa.
jump.
Whoa.
Right there too.
You have to have him go back.
You pushed it. It wasn't doing that before.
So you remember how to do that. Finish transition. Oh my god. Did you attach the camera to the thing? Yeah, you did. I'll show you how to fix that. Press the button.
How do you, where are the settings for changing the color so you don't have to pencil
So,
play?
okay, so you're going ahead,
Oh, no,
that's fine.
maybe
So
the
here is where you
preferences.
want to add the force. So, adding the force, does that make sense what I said about how it adds force? You know, because it's
See if I
basically
can.
We're looking for settings button, like
So if you want to
I
jump,
said
you
we're
want
so
to
mean
jump
today.
So for
I'll
this
let
add
you-
an action to this screen.
I don't know, are you crouching?
What?
Yeah.
You want to add force.
Not today. I just
Yeah.
messed with them. What's up?
I'll give you guys a break
What's up?
after this, by the way. So,
Okay.
just add force. So here, we're gonna
Go,
pick
go break.
what direction
Where
you
are
want
we
to add
going,
force,
G?
right?
Said something.
And how strong it is.
Oh, that's right.
So look at all the
Oh,
various
so-
parameters here. Which one of these are really important? It looks like is it if you want to add force on X, Y, or Z.
It takes a while.
So in Unity,
Actually, I kinda
Y
need
is up. Which some food or whatever and come back. And Sam, you're gonna do this in
So
script?
she's like, can I give
Alright.
you something else?
Cool.
And I was
I'm
like,
just messing
no,
around.
that's all
Yeah,
I wanted.
that's fine.
And
How,
I
how'd
left.
Pong go?
What?
How did Pong go?
You
Oh,
crushed my dream.
dude, I'm like, I was
was so
pretty much
mad.
busy. Freaking.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not gonna BS you. I don't have Pong yet.
Are you
Okay,
gonna
that's fine. Do you
be
want to
in
do
here?
Pong in
It's-
Unity or something? Or
No. If,
Mhm.
if your standard is fucking SFML, like I'm gonna follow
That's
it, whatever.
it's basic, yeah. That's actually probably the easiest way to get something in.
Key safe?
Tell you what, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I'm
install
not-
Visual.
Are you gonna stay in here?
Yeah. Why? You want to leave your stuff here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'll
Yeah,
still.
I'm not honestly trying to blow you off. It's just got a whole
Ever
bunch of
since
stuff,
Jeff's
especially
backpack
like
got jacked, I'm
with,
like
with the midterms,
super
whatever.
paranoid about my
I
stuff.
ended up doing
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
couple freaking
Yeah,
homework slash
and it was
project
like the
that
student affairs office too.
isn't due until a
Yeah,
few
like,
weeks, but I
seriously,
actually
just-
did.
Okay,
because
so I'll tell
I
you
was
what.
listening. Yeah.
I'll give you something that should only take you like 2 minutes to do.
No,
maybe
honestly,
3
if
minutes.
you-
No,
if
let me
it's
just
Pong,
let me
it's
just
Pong,
let me just let me just give you something just to get you started because I think that's probably going to be the hardest thing for you to just get it started. Is I gave you a project last 2 weeks ago, right? My Pong project that I
Yes.
made. If you need it again, let me know.
No.
All I want you to do is run my project and play my version of Pong. That's it. Once you get to that point, if you have time, you can take the paddles that I put there in Pong and make them twice as big.
Okay.
Because that'll get you at least to the point where you're compiling and running in SFML, and then you'll understand how it works in C++. So it's like the just get the project up and running, and then it should really just be open it up in the Visual Studio and then press F5. That should get it to work. So yeah,
Yes, sir.
you can do it.
I know
I know you want to.
I do. It's just
Yeah.
that, yeah. I got a whole bunch of excuses that you don't want to hear. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, you like there's only so many excuses you can have for like a week's worth of time that you had devoted to it. But I understand if you have midterms, but honestly, like, dude, it takes like no time at all, like to run a project. So I think you can do it. I think you could just get my project running and executing Visual Studio.
Yes, sir.
You got it working, Kai?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to have to go back again.
Because you want to use a ball?
Well, you said you will need like boxes and things.
Yeah.
I don't want stuff.
Well, no, it's fine if you did more, but I think that the goal of the class is not to do more visual stuff. It's to do simple, fun games. It's not like making complex games, right?
But next year it's okay, right?
Next year you can do more. But right now, if you spend a lot of time trying to get something complex, you can't get gameplay. It's not a level design class. Like, the maze and the race are just like the very beginning. It's not about designing interesting spaces. Really, it's about making interesting games.
Totally got it to work.
You got to work?
Yeah.
With the rate cats?
Yep.
Cool.
This is a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, there you go.
And
Well,
so it's just straight past it and shoot it to the ground and it comes back through and you can jump.
Sweet. So you can jump in the air, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's actually the basics of any side scroller controller too. Like any side scrolling controller, you're doing raycast down as soon as you're on the ground.
Okay.
Once you're on the ground, that's when you enable things like jumping, or if you don't want to allow like attacking in the air, that kind of thing, you can use that to detect whether you're in the air or not.
Yeah, it's seeing more possibilities.
That's go break.
So I was adding a character.
What's that?
I was adding a character and then like adding a 3D, third-person controller.
Okay.
Adding animation in.
Yeah, like you don't need animations. Like this is like you need a ball, you know? Eventually you'll get to animations, but you're still learning Playmaker right now. Like I want you to make a game. Like, how are you gonna make your brand awesome like turn-based strategy game if you can't make a ball move? And the cool thing is that you can make like a turn-based strategy game with Playmaker. That's like the cool part. Because you can click on things, you can detect whether you've clicked on